In a quiet village, nestled among the hills, there lived a woman named Martha. She had once been known for her love and care for her children, but those days seemed far behind her. Life as a single mother was not what she had envisioned. Ever since her husband had left without a trace when their youngest child was only a baby, Martha found herself increasingly consumed by the weight of her responsibilities. Over time, what had started as a momentary escape turned into a habit. She would spend hours upon hours on her phone or watching TV, seeking refuge in the bright, flickering screen rather than the real world around her. Her two children, Kobe, who was 5, and Amora, just 3, had learned to fend for themselves in the small, cluttered house. Kobe had once been an energetic boy, always eager to play with his sister or show his mother the things he created. Amora, sweet and trusting, followed her brother around the house, looking up to him as her protector and best friend. But with their mother so engrossed in her world of technology, they began to drift into their own little universe, one without adult supervision. Martha would sit on the couch, the TV blaring in the background as her fingers mindlessly scrolled through social media. Kobe, yearning for his mother's attention, would run to her side and tug at her dress. "Mama, look what I made," he'd say, holding up a drawing of their family or a paper airplane he had crafted. But Martha's responses were always the same. "Not now, Kobe. Go play with your sister." At first, Kobe would try to engage his mother, hoping she would eventually look up and smile at him like she used to. But soon, even his persistence faded. He began to realize that his mother was no longer present in the way she once was, and so he turned to Amora for companionship. The two of them would play together, building imaginary worlds from the remnants of their childhood innocence. But something had begun to change in Kobe. Left unsupervised for so long, he had started watching the same shows Martha had on the TV, absorbing images and behavior he didn't fully understand. The loud arguments, the violent clashes, and the reckless abandon of the characters in the shows began to shape his imagination in ways neither he nor his mother could comprehend. It wasn't long before Kobe started mimicking what he saw on the screen. Martha's favorite shows were full of loud, fast-paced action, characters yelling, hitting each other, and engaging in behaviors that were far too mature for children. Kobe, still too young to differentiate between fantasy and reality, began to see these actions as part of play. To him, the characters on TV weren't doing anything wrong, they were just having fun. One evening, after Martha had fallen into her usual trance in front of the TV, Kobe turned to Amora with a mischievous grin. "Let's play like they do on TV," he said. Amora, always trusting of her older brother, nodded even though she didn't fully understand what he meant. Kobe picked up one of his toys and pretended it was a sword, just like the ones the characters on TV used. He swung it around wildly, laughing as he did. Amora giggled at first, but as Kobe's play became more aggressive, her laughter turned into nervous giggles. Kobe raised his hand, pretending to strike her like he had seen on TV. "Look, Amora. Just like them." Amora flinched but didn't complain. She trusted her brother and thought it was all just a game. The two continued to play this way, with Kobe imitating the characters from the shows he had been watching. Over the following weeks, Kobe's behavior grew more erratic. He began to get rougher with Amora during their playtime, pushing and shoving as he acted out scenes from the TV shows. Amora, though confused by her brother's new behavior, continued to follow his lead. After all, he was her big brother, and she looked up to him. Meanwhile, Martha remained oblivious to the changes in her children. Her attention was always elsewhere, focused on her phone or the latest episode of whatever show had captured her interest. She didn't notice the way Kobe's games had shifted from imaginative play to something darker. She didn't see how Amara was becoming quieter, more withdrawn. It was a warm afternoon when the tragedy that would forever change their lives began to unfold. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light through the windows of their modest home. Martha, as usual, was planted on the couch, her phone in hand and the TV droning on in the background. Kobe and Amora were playing nearby, their toys scattered across the floor. Kobe, now fully immersed in the violent world of his TV-inspired games, turned to Amora with a toy in his hand. "Let's play the game where we fight," he said excitedly. Amora hesitated. She had grown uncomfortable with these games, especially as Kobe had become rougher and more insistent that they mimic what they saw on TV. "I don't like that game," she whispered, her eyes wide with uncertainty. But Kobe, filled with the thrill of his imagination, wouldn't take no for an answer. "It's just pretend, Amora. Don't be scared. I'm your brother. It's fun." Reluctantly, Amora nodded. She trusted Kobe more than anything, and even though she didn't like the way the game made her feel, she didn't want to upset him. Kobe raised the toy, mimicking the exaggerated movements of the characters on TV. He swung it through the air, pretending to strike his imaginary enemies. But then something shifted. Kobe's excitement grew, and he swung the toy harder, his small body mimicking the forceful movements he had seen on screen. Amora backed away, her fear growing as her brother's play became more intense. "Stop, Kobe," she whimpered, stepping back. "I don't like this." But Kobe, lost in the moment, didn't hear her. He swung the toy again, harder this time, and it connected with Amora's head. The world seemed to freeze. Amora's small body crumpled to the floor, her eyes wide in shock as she fell. Kobe, still holding the toy, stood in stunned silence. He hadn't meant to hurt her. It was just a game, like the ones on TV. But now, Amora wasn't moving. "Amora," Kobe whispered, dropping the toy and rushing to her side. "Amora, wake up." But there was no response. Amora lay still on the floor, her eyes closed, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Kobe's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't understand what had happened. He didn't know how to fix it. All he knew was that something was terribly wrong. He shook his sister gently, trying to wake her, but she remained motionless. Panic surged through him, and he ran to the couch where his mother sat, still engrossed in her phone. "Mama! Mama, something's wrong with Amora." Martha, annoyed at being interrupted, barely glanced up from her screen. "Kobe, I told you to play with your sister. What did you do now?" But when she finally looked at her son's still strict face, her heart sank. There was something in his eyes, fear, confusion, guilt, that made her stomach churn. She followed his gaze to where Amora lay on the floor, still and silent. In that moment, Martha's world shattered. She dropped her phone, her heart pounding in her chest as she rushed to Amora's side. "Amora," she cried, shaking her daughter gently. "Amora, wake up." But Amora didn't stir. Her small body was limp in Martha's arms, her breathing shallow and labored. As Martha held her daughter's fragile body, the weight of her neglect crashed down upon her like a tidal wave. How had she let it come to this? How had she allowed herself to become so consumed by her phone, her TV, her distractions, that she had failed to notice the changes in her children? Tears streamed down her face as she called out to Amora, her voice shaking with desperation. "Amora, please. Wake up." But there was no response. Kobe stood frozen, watching his mother cry over his sister. He didn't understand the gravity of what had happened. To him, it was just a game gone wrong. But seeing his mother's tears, he began to realize that something was horribly, irreversibly wrong. Martha dialed the emergency number with trembling hands, her voice cracking as she begged for help. "Please," she sobbed into the phone. "My daughter, she's not moving. Please, come quickly." The paramedics arrived within minutes, but to Martha, it felt like an eternity. She clung to Amora, her mind racing with thoughts of guilt and regret. How had she failed her children so completely? How had she let this happen? When the paramedics arrived, they gently took Amora from Martha's arms and examined her. Martha watched in agony as they walked, their faces grim and focused. She wanted to scream, to demand that they save her daughter, but she couldn't find the words. All she could do was watch, her heart breaking with each passing second. Finally, one of the paramedics looked up, his expression somber. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "There's nothing we can do." Martha's world collapsed around her. She fell to her knees, her body shaking with sobs as the weight of the paramedic's words sunk in. Her daughter, her sweet, innocent Amora, was gone. And it was all her fault. Kobe, still too young to fully understand the finality of death, stood nearby, watching his mother cry. He didn't know what to do, didn't know how to fix what had happened. All he knew was that his sister wasn't waking up, and his mother was broken in a way he had never seen before. The village soon learned of the tragedy, and whispers of blame began to circulate. People who had once sympathized with Martha's struggles as a single mother now pointed fingers. They spoke of how she had neglected her children, how she had let her phone and TV take priority over their well-being. Some pitied her, but most judged her harshly, blaming her for the loss of her daughter. The guilt consumed Martha. She could barely look at Kobe without feeling the crushing weight of her failure. Martha, though broken by grief, knew she couldn't continue living in the darkness of her guilt forever. She had lost one child, but she still had Kobe, and she knew that she needed to be there for him. Slowly, painfully, she began to rebuild her life, one small step at a time. She turned off the TV, put away her phone, and began to focus on Kobe in a way she hadn't before. They would sit together, talking about Amora, about the good times they had shared, and about the lessons they had learned from their tragic loss. The village, too, began to soften toward Martha and Kobe. They saw the changes she had made, the way she had turned her grief into a lesson for others. Parents in the village began to pay more attention to their own children, spending less time in front of screens and more time engaging with their families.